A lot of us have started thinking about whether what we do for a living is what we want to always do, right? This is a really nice time to consider financial freedom as your way out of the corporate grind. This is a really good time to define your real estate investing strategy. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about flipping versus the BRRRR strategy, which is what we specialize in. We're going to talk about why we never flipped a property, even though we could. And we're approaching 100 rentals right now, and we absolutely love it. Both of us quit our six-figure jobs, and we are full-time in real estate right now. And there's a reason we were able to do it in the last 5 years, right? Because the strategy means so much. If your financial freedom, if that's your destination, if that's where you want to go, then defining that strategy and deciding that path forward, that's going to be the journey you want to take to reach that destination.
And this is, by the way, what we do. And even this specific topic is not just whether you have 0, 1, or 5. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how many properties you have. You can always learn how to scale it. As long as you know what your strategy is. It's super important to have your strategy right. And one of the reasons we were able to scale so quickly is because, we picked one strategy that we really, really liked, and then we doubled down on it, and we didn't get distracted by all these other strategies, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the keys. And that's why you want to have a strategy that aligns with your vision, and you want to stick to that strategy.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What you said is, just pick one strategy and stick to it. And that is the reason we were able to grow so fast. I love that.
So let's dig into it. The question is, should I flip houses or should I BRRRR them? Right? This is the age-old question. And just to take a step back, and for those of you who may not know what BRRRR is, let's just kind of go over what the difference is between a flip and a BRRRR, right? So in a flip, you would buy a distressed property, you would rehab it, make it look really, really nice, with the goal of ultimately selling it, right? So your goal would be in a flip to just make money by forcing the appreciation and selling the property. And as opposed to a BRRRR strategy, where you would you start off the same way, right? So you buy a distressed property and you rehab it. But instead of selling it, you rent it out, you refinance the property and pull most of your cash out, and sometimes all of your cash out. And then you repeat the same process, right? So because you're using the same capital, do it over and over again. That's what BRRRR is, the repeat part. So that's the difference. So in a flip, you would buy it, rehab it, and sell it. In a BRRRR strategy, you buy it, you rehab it, you rent it out, and then refinance to pull your cash out. So we've grappled with this question a lot, especially when we started out. We're like, wait, should we flip? Because you can make so much more money when you flip, right? Like, it's like, oh, you can make 20, 30 grand when you flip a house. And then that could replace our income and things like that.
And all these shows, right? Like HGTV and what's that? Chip and Joanna? What's the show called? Drop it in the chat, whatever that show is. It's so cool. I love watching these things. It's all about really renovating and decorating properties. And although it can be a creative outlet, it's not a wealth building play, right? And the BRRRR strategy may not be as sexy as any of those things, but it's absolutely incredible on how lucrative it is, especially the way we supercharge it.
Yeah. And by the way, like every property that we BRRRR, we could also flip. But we choose not to, right? And these are 3 reasons that we're going to go over today as to why we always choose to BRRRR and not flip.
And we're going to do numbers, and we're going to do an apples to apples comparison, numbers between flip and BRRRR. So stick around. And if at the end, we would love to know if you decide that flip is the right option for you, we'd love to know that.
Yeah. All right. So starting with reason number 1 as to why we would always BRRRR rather than flip. So this is the golden goose principle, right? And we all know about the golden goose. So how does that apply to real estate, right? And to flip versus BRRRR. So let's talk numbers, because I think explaining it through numbers just will solidify it. And these are real numbers that we're talking about. So it'll just make a lot more. This is pure facts, right? This is not my opinion or anybody else's opinion. This is literally how a numbers would work for a flip versus BRRRR. So if you're doing a flip, say you buy a distressed property for 75,000, right? And the rehab for it is 25,000. Other costs are around 10,000. So your total investment, the other costs are very important because a lot of people don't take this into account. Those could be holding costs, things like that. But for simplicity, we're just going to call them other costs here. And your total investment is 110,000, right?
Now, exact same property.
Yes.
Right. And whether you flip or you BRRRR, all of this stays the same.
Exactly.
You're going to have acquisition costs, you're going to have renovation costs, you're going to have your soft costs, which are your other costs. We've bunched them into this 10K right now.
And so you'll see the total investment so far for a flip versus BRRRR is the same, right? It's 110,000, which is why up to this point, everything is the same. And because you force the appreciation, right, in both these properties, whether you flip it or BRRRR it, the ARV is now 160,000 for both, right? So that's the new ARV. So if you go to sell in the market, that's what you would get. And
I want to make sure that everybody who's here understands what ARV is. So this is the magic of renovating properties. When I say yourself, I don't mean DIY. We are not about the DIY. But when you take on the job of finding a distressed property and renovating it, you force it to appreciate. ARV is the after repair value. And there's a difference between what the property is worth when you're done versus what you actually spent on it, right? 110 versus 160.
And you just built that, you just forced that appreciation, right? So that's the amazing part about rehabbing a property. So now the ARV is 160,000, which means that you've just created an equity of $50,000, right? So now what does that mean for a flip? So for a flip, you would go out and sell that property for 160,000, which means you made a profit of $50,000. However, in a flip, you'd have to pay taxes of at least 35%, so 30%, sometimes it's 35%, right? Depending on what your tax bracket is, sometimes it could be more. Now you just paid taxes, and now after deducting the 15,000, you're left with $35,000.
This is the number we're talking about.
In a flip, right? So you sold it, you got taxed on it, and you're with $35,000, and that's all the money that house is going to make you ever, because you're done with that house, you've sold it. Now, what happens in a BRRRR is very interesting, right? So your ARV is 160,000. Your profit now is, or your equity, so to speak, in this case, because we're not selling it, so it's 50,000.
So by equity, if you don't know what equity means, that is the money that you have in the house, right? Yeah. That's how you can understand what it means. Yeah. It means that the house is worth more than what you owe, and that difference is the equity that you have in the house. So if you were to sell it, you could have that money.
Exactly. So that's the equity in the BRRRR property that you have. Right now, let's talk about what happens here. So you already made that equity. So what you would do in this case is you would, in the BRRRR instance, you would, instead of selling it, you would go to a bank and say, I want to refinance my property. And so give me a 75% or 80% loan to value against this, right? So the bank would say, okay, since your property is worth 160, we're willing to give you, X amount back, and you'll be able to pull majority of the 50,000 cash out of the property.
110, you'll be able to pull the 110.
Right. That's right. And that's basically all of your money that you'd put into it, right? So the bank will say, okay, here's 110,000, and you have basically that cash now in your hands to do another project. That's where the last R comes from, the repeat. That was a question in the chat. Like, what does repeat mean? Now what you can do is you can take the 110,000, you've already created an asset. Now you take the same $110,000 and then do another project and another one and another one. So that's the repeat part of that.
So you're basically recycling the same money that you did your first project with, and that's where the last R in the BRRRR strategy comes from.
So now let's talk about the golden goose, right? In a flip, you would have had the 35,000 and that's it. You just kill the goose. Whereas in BRRRR, because you hold on to it for a period of time, here's what happens. Over a period of 10 years, and we're only saying 10 years, you could hold on to it for 20 or 30, but let's just say in 10 years, your cash flow would be around $36,000, right? After you pay off the mortgage and expenses every month, you'll be left with,
if you make about $300 a month, that comes out to
That comes up to 36,000
a
in
year.
10.
I was doing it in my head as you were talking.
36,000 in 10
we
years.
put this together a while ago. We were like, what did we use again?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And the appreciation, if you use like a 3% appreciation over the period of 10 years, that's $55,000. And you just made an appreciation.
And that's pretty conservative, right? 3% appreciation is a very conservative number that we're using here. So, I mean, can you imagine appreciation alone is $55,000 in 10 years? And that's only assuming that it goes up by 3% every year.
Yeah. And what a big part that people sometimes don't use for the calculations is the principal pay down, right? So because you're getting rent every month, you're also paying down the principal loan that you have on the property, which amounts to another $50,000 over a period of 10 years. So now you just made $191,000 from one property, from the same property that you're going to kill and just get $35,000. Now, by keeping it for 10 years, you just made $190,000. And if you keep it for another 10 years, it'll double, right? That's why for us, it's a no-brainer. Every time we're like, should we sell this and make a quick 35? No, why would we? Because we're going to make 190 over a period of 10 years. And the best part about BRRRR is that you can use that same capital that you used to buy the first one to do your second and your third and your fourth. So it's a great way to basically eliminate the capital constraint that people would have.
And so over the course of the 10 years, you're not just going to use that money and try to backtracking a bit. Over the course of the next 10 years, what you're going to do is you're going to take that money and you're going to invest it in more and more and more properties. We're not even taking that into account here, right? We're saying that $191,000 is if you just did that one deal. You're not going to stop there. You're going to use the repeat philosophy, right, that we just talked about, and you're going to repeat it again and again. So it's not 191,000, it's much more.
Yeah, totally. We don't ever want to sell our properties. We want to pass them on to our kids. So when we die at some point, when we're 70 or 80, or hopefully much later than that, we want to pass that on to the kids and they will own it, right? And imagine, like, if it can do this in 10 years, we can get 190,000. Think about what it can do in 20 or 30 or 40 years, right? That's the power of buy and hold real estate. When I first started in real estate, somebody told me, a very wise man told me, the way you get rich in real estate is not by peddling real estate. It's not by buying and selling real estate. It's by buying and holding on to real estate. That's where the true wealth generation happens. When people do flips, they're generating income. They're not generating wealth. Wealth accumulation only happens when you hold on to something for a long period of time. And you can clearly see the numbers are there, right?
And, when you flip or when you're involved in wholesaling or in other ways, when it comes to real estate investing, in my mind, that's not considered investing, because you've not invested that money long term to see the true results, right? That is running a business that's making an income, and that is necessary for some people. It has a place. But that's not the same thing as building wealth.
But one other thing to point out, that when you flip, you just paid 30% tax on the 50,000 that you pulled out, right? Whereas when you BRRRR and you pull the cash out of refinance, $110,000 that you're going to get, the bank is going to give you as a loan, you don't have to pay any taxes on it. So it's tax-free, right? Obviously, because it's a loan. So that is another huge benefit. But what you just mentioned, June, we're going to come to that as we talk about other tax advantages.
When you refinance, do you refi for 160 and give yourself that 50K profit, or only take it out for 110 to get the initial investment back and then rely on the rental cash flow to pay off that 110?
The latter, right? So you're basically pulling.
You cannot pull all the money out.
You can only pull up to 75 or 80%, Raj, right? So you can, which will be around 110.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to pull most, if not all, of the 110 out, and then you use it for the next one. And then you can see in the calculations, the way the property pays for itself is through cash flow, right? Not only cash flow, but also through appreciation over time, through the debt pay down and taxes.
So this is a great example of a little single family deal that typically most of the people we work with, they'll pick up something like this. You purchase a property for around 75,000, renovate it for 45,000. And again, for the sake of simplicity, we have rounded the numbers because everything that ends in a 0 or a 5 is easier to talk about and calculate in our heads, right? And then also for the sake of simplicity, we've taken all of the soft costs and other expenses and we've bunched them in with either the acquisition or the renovation costs. So for a property like this, once you're done with renovating it, say the after repair value, the ARV is 180,000, and then your rent would be around 1,400 per month. Your cash flow after you eliminate all the expenses is going to be around 400 a month, and you just created $50,000 in equity in that one deal, right? So most people who work with us, they pretty much make, a ton of money on their very first deal, and you're not even going to stop there, right? And this is an example of the potential. So this is a 10-unit deal. People who worked with us for about a year or so, they are looking into deals like this. This is actually a deal that we did. So we purchased this 10-unit deal for $375K. We renovated all 10 units for $275. The rent for all of the 10 units combined was $12K per month. And then after everything was said and done, the property appraised for $1 million. The cash flow, after all the expenses were taken out of the rent and the mortgage and everything, $3,500 a month. This is the cash flow that you can make for life on a deal like this. Yeah. And the equity created for a property like this is around $250K. You force that property to appreciate by $250K, right? This is basically more than my annual salary when I was working in corporate. And I worked on this deal for less than an hour a week.
Yeah.
Right. I would never have made this kind of money working an hour a week in my profession. I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I worked for 17 years on my degree. I would have never done that in, all the years, that 60 years of education and 17 years of working. 23 years would have never given me that for working an hour a week. So think about that, and think about the $3,500 per month in cash flow. That's for life.
And by the way, and this is again going back to the flip versus BRRRR. If we had sold this, it would have been the worst decision of our lives, because here's why. So we would have made $250K if we sold it, right? If we had just flipped it, which sounds like, oh, we made $250K. That's a pretty good number on one deal. But we held on to it. So this is a deal we did like 2 years back. Since then, the property is now valued at $1.2 million. So not only did we create the $250K in equity and the $3,500 a month in cash flow, we just recently refinanced it and we refinanced it again.
Same property.
And we pulled out another $200,000. So we've just basically got another $200,000, which we would never have gotten.
The golden goose laid another egg.
Right.
You don't give that golden goose up.
And we've made for the last 2 years $3,500 a month, right?
And this $3,500,
which we would not have made if we had sold the property.
And it gets us so excited when we talk about this. This $3,500 per month, guys, is also tax-free.
Yes.
So if you're going to compare this to your salary, compare it to your take-home salary, right? After everything you deduct, what do you get? That's what you compare it to.
Yes.
Which brings us to reason number 2, which is tax advantages. Any questions that you guys have, drop them in the chat. We will come back to them at the end. So that brings us to reason number 2, tax advantages. And you touched on that a little bit. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So there's, other than, what we just talked about, which is, and let's talk about this slide again, the same deal that we talked about, right? So there's a couple of tax advantages that you get in a BRRRR that you never get in a flip. One is that in flip, as we said, you'd have to pay this 30% tax when you sell it. In BRRRR, you don't have to do that because you're refinancing and pull the cash out. When you pull the cash out, you don't have to pay taxes on it because it's a loan, but you're still getting cash in your hand, right? So that's number one. Number two is that this cash flow number right here, the 36,000 for 10 years in this specific deal, that is tax free, because as June mentioned, that there is something called depreciation, which is an advantage that government gives you for owning rental property. It's for nothing else that you get pretty much tax free, but you do get it if you own a rental, which is that you can claim depreciation against your against your profits every year, right? And so you would pay zero taxes on the $36,000 that you make because of depreciation.
And again, we're not accountants, so let's just put that disclaimer out there. We're not accountants. Work it out with your accountant, but usually depreciation offsets any profit you make. So your cash flow is tax-free, your equity that you forced is tax-free, your principal payment is tax-free, your appreciation is tax-free. As long as you hold the property, you don't get taxed on any of that.
Right.
So absolutely brilliant. And reason number 3 is that flips are higher risk. And I'm gonna show you what we mean by that by drawing this market cycle chart. Let's think about it from the perspective of property values versus time, right? So say this axis is property values, and then here we're looking at time, right? Say we're here, and we know that historically real estate prices continue to go up, right? So real estate prices continue to go up, but this graph is an oversimplified version. In reality, the way it works is it goes like this, right? It's not going to be straight up going up. Sometimes there might be dips. Sometimes there might be dips in the market cycle. The reason long-term buy and hold investing is the safest option out there is because if you're going to flip that property, you don't want to be caught here, right? You don't want to be at a point where you purchase the property at the top of the little market cycle that you're a part of, you tried to flip it, and instead of it going up from there, it actually went down, right? You don't want to get stuck here trying to flip that property, because flip is a very short-term gain. What you want to do is you want to invest for long-term gains, so that whether you purchase a property here or you purchase the property here, and whether there are dips in the market cycle, you continue to go up if you look at it from the long-term perspective. And that's how I want you to start thinking about it. Everybody who talks about how they lost money in real estate, and they're all the people who are trying to make a quick buck and get out of it. As long as you're in it for the long haul, and as long as you're investing for long-term, these little changes are not going to impact you.
And that's the idea, right? Like, this is what we've known for so long, and we're like, wait, people need to know like why we never flip, because we could flip every single property that we do this with, that we rehab, but we never do. And so that's why this is why I want to show you a practical example of what we just discussed, right? So this is how what Palak just mentioned about the market cycles, this is how it manifests itself. And we've had firsthand experience of this. So this is a property. This actually happened to us. So these are real numbers. This is a property that Palak purchased in 2008, back in 2008, just before the market crash, right? So this is before the market went crazy and the housing market plummeted.
Right before the crash. Perfect time to buy it.
So she bought it at 120,000, right? and this was a rental, right? So she bought it for 120, and right after the crash, within a few months, the market value went down to 85,000. So the market value dropped by $35,000 in a few months because it was the absolute worst time in history for real estate, right?
And I still remember we had just started dating, and we were like talking about moving in together. And every time it went down, I was like, I need to sell this. And I wasn't living there anyway anymore, and it was a rental. And I was like, I need to sell this
before it goes even further down.
Yeah, before it's going down. I need to sell it. And he kept telling me, he's like, just hold on to it. Just hold on to it.
So here's what happened, right? So it went down by $35,000, but it was rented out. So throughout and we've held on to it for the last 12 years now, right? Every month we would make $250 in cash flow. So that's after we receive the rent, we would pay the mortgage and any expenses, and we were left with $250. That's the cash flow, that's the profit, right? Every month. So in the last 12 years, our cash flow has been $36,000, right? The appreciation. So now it's worth even more. But when we made the slide, the market value was up to 150,000. Now I think it's worth 160, 170. So we made another $30,000 just through appreciation because we held on to it for 12 years, even though we bought it at the worst point in history and the price had gone down by 35,000. It's now back up. It's back up by 30,000, right? And the debt pay down. So we had paid the loan, the mortgage got paid down by $40,000 in the last 12 months. So now if we were to sell it today, we would make a profit of $106,000, right? And that is after we suffered a loss of $35,000 within a few months because of the market crash. And this is the power of buy and hold investing.
One of the things that we learned as we started going through buy and hold investing is all of the wisdom that you get from parents and neighbors and coworkers and all doesn't apply. If you want to build a solid multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio, you need to understand commercial finance. You cannot operate the same way you've been operating up until the point where you decided to become a multi-million-dollar real estate investor. You really need to understand commercial finance. So when we talk about refinancing and all of that stuff, just keep in mind that there are no limits when you understand commercial finance. That's what we do.
Yeah. And so again, just to recap, and we're going to get to Q&A. So as you have questions, please type them in the chat. Would love to cover any questions that you guys have. But this is just the advantage of BRRRR, right? Like, look at that. Flip has like 1x, which is just forced equity. That's literally all you get in a flip. Versus BRRRR, you can take advantage of appreciation, of cash flow, of debt pay down, of amazing tax benefits that you'd get just for both buying and holding. And you can scale a lot more in BRRRR because now every time your cash flow is going up, your income is going up, and you can build your portfolio pretty quick. That is one of the biggest reasons why we scaled so quickly, because a lot of people in real estate, when we started, who had like 2 or 3 rentals, and they still have only 5 or 10 rentals. And the reason we're getting close to 100 is because we used commercial financing and we learned it really, really well. And that's what we teach. So that's, in fact, what we teach. The financing itself could be its own program because there's just so much that goes into the financing. And by the way, I come from a finance background. I worked in finance and strategy for 10 years.
He has 2 masters in that.
But it still took me like months to learn commercial financing. And we teach that to you pretty quickly because you wouldn't have to learn from scratch. You learn it from us, which is a lot easier.
Yes. And this is something you cannot DIY. This is something you have to learn from an expert. So we ask that you have at a minimum $25,000 to invest in your portfolio. So good advice never comes free, but we really want to make sure that you're not taking major risks before you even have a little bit of savings, right? So whether it's savings, it can be in your 401k, it can be in a HELOC, it can be if you're a friend or a family member is willing to lend to you, they're going to get it back. But yeah, have access to about 25k.
And just that's what separates us from a lot of the gurus that are out there who will tell you just sign up for our program. I don't care how much cash you have. We're not like that. We make our program exclusive, and we want you to have some money when you come in so that you can implement in the program.
Yeah, we really want to be responsible about how we're going to have you spend your money too.
So please fill out the form, and if we are a good fit, then we can hop on a call. Someone from our team will hop on a call with you, and we can discuss the options and give you more details about the program.